Hello everyone, and we are back for another chapter call for the fanfic. The Asha chapter is nearly complete, just putting on some final touches, and the Davos chapter is starting to be assembled. Which brings us to perhaps the most highly anticipated chapter of the Ice and Fire fanfic yet. Melisandre. We're finally getting to what's happening at Castle Black. And well, there are a boatload of characters and complexity at the wall, so much so that this chapter is largely about orienting us to the new state of things. However, the hard part is we really need to focus on keeping things feeling like Melisandre. So obviously everyone needs to reread the Mel chapter from A Dance with Dragons to get the feel of her. Mel's sentences are generally surprisingly short and bold, reflecting her bold personality, except when she's looking into the flames. Then they're more poetic. The general point of this chapter is that Mel is switching from thinking that people like Stannis and Jon Snow were the center of the world, to arrogantly thinking that she herself is the center of the world. Slowly, Mel is going to believe that all of her visions are actually about herself, and that she is Azor Ahai. By the way, if you have the time to put in little tidbits about her past and the city of Asshai, now's the time to do it. Anyway, on to the outline. Part 1. The Night's Watch. So we begin with Melisandre staring into the flames, asking to see Azor Ahai. Mel is experiencing massive doubt, fearing Stannis is dead, and knowing Jon Snow to be dead. And here I'd like a mixture of visions that Mel has already seen, along with anything new you'd like. Think about what's going on in the world at this moment, and check out the beginning of the Melisandre chapter in A Dance with Dragons as a comparison. But it's fairly important that Mel sees something that makes her want to visit Cregan Karstark by chapter's end. I suggest a black sun rising over a field of snow. Who knows, maybe it signifies Darkstar. But she inverts this and thinks it's white on black, and thus the Karstarks. So her visions are next interrupted by a knock. Devon will answer and will say that the Black Brothers are here. Mel gives a small nod, but doesn't take her eyes from the flame. Enter 3 brothers of the Night's Watch: Emmerich, Sweet Donal Hill, and Ulmer of the Kingswood. They all look like corpses. Emmerich is still reeling from killing his twin brother, the others distraught, having recently had so many friends and brothers die. Mel doesn't move, and the 3 brothers will begin to argue about whether Mel is asleep. Ulmer will say that he learned to sleep standing up with his eyes open long ago, and if you'd like, you can have Ulmer tell a short tale involving his ability and the Smiling Knight. Mel will turn from the flames and ask what they want. Sweet Donal Hill will explain that they received a raven from Greyguard. Donal has been handling the ravens ever since they executed Clytus. He had once been friends with the previous raven tender, Chet. Donal will say that some of the Weeper's men have climbed the wall at Sentinel's Stand, and now Greyguard is threatened. They fought off the first attack, but more wildlings scale the wall each day. The Shadow Tower isn't much help, as they're dealing with wildlings at the Bridge of Skulls. Mel will think about how she was right. The assault on the Bridge of Skulls was in fact a diversion. But she won't understand why Greyguard was the point of attack when her visions clearly showed the sea. Was the Weeper the sea? Ulmer will say that Greyguard only has a garrison of 60 men, and it's only a matter of time until it falls. And then the Weeper will move down the wall, taking castles one by one, searching for a way through for the thousands who can't make the climb. After the mutiny, Sir Dennis sealed the tunnel at the Shadow Tower, so the wildlings will be heading east, to here, Castle Black and its gate. And even if they seal the gate at Castle Black, the wildlings will just keep going east onto Eastwatch. And here we'll give the background on what's up with Ulmer. Ulmer of the Kingswood took command of the Night's Watch after the death of Jon Snow and the executions of Bowen Marsh and Awful Yarwick. With Cotter Pike missing and Sir Dennis Mallister fighting off attacks at the Bridge of Skulls, they couldn't hold an election, but someone needed to lead the watch, and Ulmer filled the void. None protested, save old Sir Winston Stout, who's been proclaiming that he's in command, though I'll ignore him. Still, the Black Brothers are all Ulmer commands, as the Queen's Men, Northmen, and Wildlings keep to themselves. Mel wants to know what they want from her. Emmerich will explain that there isn't exactly trust between the Night's Watch and the other men at the wall, but they're going to need help defending Castle Black if they're going to stand against the Weeper. The Night's Watch accepts Ulmer as their leader, but Queen Selyse's men, the Wildlings and the Northmen, won't take orders from him. The Night's Watch doesn't have enough men for regular watches and use most of their force for guarding the food stores. The others come to the Night's Watch for their food rations, yes, but otherwise, they don't talk. It's been a miracle that there hasn't been more fighting, and they fear that Morna White Mask is going to lead an attack on them one of these nights, despite them having her kin as hostages. Dunnell Hill will say that maybe Mel can speak with Queen Salice's men, and the Queen knows that wildling Garrick Kingsblood. He could talk to Morna and the other wildlings. They tried sending Jax to speak with the wildlings, but he's not a clan leader, and the wildlings don't respect him much. Garrick Kingsblood could perhaps have their ear. Ulmer admits he's not sure who would speak to the Northmen since Duncan Little was slain. There's less than a score of Northmen at the wall, but every man is needed, and they might be able to send for more men. They could maybe talk to Alice Karstark and get the Thens to come back. The talk of the Karstarks makes Mel think of Cregan again. She recalls that Jon Snow sent off 200 Thens with Alice Karstark to retake Carhold, and they should be arriving there soon. It was 200 of their best fighters. Jon Snow was convinced Carhold would surrender, but Mel isn't so certain. There may be a battle, with hundreds needlessly dying. Anyway, Mel agrees to speak to the men, and the chapter will take on a nature similar to Samwell 5, A Storm of Swords, when Sam tries to get Dennis Mallister and Cotter Pike to agree to the same candidate. Part 2. The Queen's Men. So Mel first ascends the King's Tower to Queen Salice's chambers. There, two of Salice's knights stand outside, and Mel can think about what the Queen's men were doing the night of the mutiny. The knights fought bravely, some knights defending the King's Tower, some took down the giant, and others went up the wooden stairs, taking down the mutineers' archers. When the fighting was done, though, they had their losses. Among the dead they found a dozen knights, including Sir Merrill, Sir Lampert, Sir Morgan, Sir Bruce, and 2 Sir Patricks. One of the Patricks had been a ruse, an old frozen corpse dressed to resemble him by the mutineers in order to frighten the giant. Anyway, Mel will enter the chambers to find Shireen asleep in the bed, with Patchface asleep at its foot. Salice and Axel Florent are breaking their fast on some food prepared by a campfire outside. There'd been no organized meals since Three Finger Hob had been executed. The Night's Watch, the Wildlings, the Queen's Men, and the Northmen have been taking their rations and cooking their own meals. Mel will explain that the Weeper is attacking down the wall and will be taking castles one by one. Salice will ask if they should flee to Eastwatch, but Axel Florent will insist that this is the battle for the Dawn. They need to remain here until Stannis returns from the dead as Azor Ahai reborn. Salice will look unsure and ask if Mel has seen that in her flames. Mel will lie and say that she's seen Stannis' return. Mel will then continue with the business. The Night's Watch wants them to accept Ulmer of the Kingswood as their commander in order to best defend Castle Black and bring the wall to order. If we can ask Garrick Kingsblood, and Axel Florent will interrupt and scoff as the Kingswood Brotherhood terrorized the Reach for many years. Ulmer deserves to be burned, not given command. The Night's Watch needs one who has accepted the Lord of Light. Mayhaps that Alf of Runnymud. Mel will remind Sir Axel that Alf of Runnymud was executed as a mutineer. Sir Axel says someone else then, but Mel doubts any of the other converts have the respect and experience to lead. Mel asks if there's anyone else in the Watch that they might accept commands from. Perhaps Satin, or Tim Stone, or Iron Emmett if he returns to Castle Black. Sir Axel is adamant, only a follower of the Lord of Light. What else explains why they've been suffering so? Stannis' death, the mutiny. The Lord of Light is punishing them for their actions. Only when they return to his path will the Lord of Light return King Stannis to them reborn. Only then will the stone dragons wake. Salice excuses herself, clearly upset, leaving only Mel and Sir Axel with sleeping Shireen and Patchface. Sir Axel then suggests that the Lord of Light may be seeking an offering, a sacrifice, someone with power in their blood. The wildling Garrick, perhaps, if they can find him. They haven't seen him for days. Or Mance's son, the babe. Or... He glances at a stirring Shireen. Part 3. The Yard. So Mel descends the King's Tower and decides that she doesn't have the time to search for Garrick Kingsblood and doesn't need to. She knows he commands no respect and she can treat with the wildlings herself. She exits the tower to the site of the wall and considers its power again. And then she recalls Orell's eagle and how it burst into flames. Everyone believed that was her doing, but in truth, she hadn't even noticed. It was the wall that did it, she concluded. Some power. The eagle flew too close. Mel begins to walk across the yard and sees the charred remains of the shield hall in the distance. It's then we can find out what happened there. Wick Whittlestick locked the shield hall and the mutineers set it ablaze. The cobweb-filled hall burned quickly and all 300 men within perished that night, including nearly all of the chieftains. Tormund Giantsbane, dead. Soren Shieldbreaker, dead. Gavin the Traitor, Harl the Handsome, Harl the Huntsman, Brog, Egon Oldfeather, Howd Wanderer, Blind Doss, the Great Walrus, and Barok. All dead, though Mel takes comfort in the fact that they were given to the Lord of Light. Besides Garrick Kingsblood, only Kyleg the Wooden Ear had survived by the luck of his oversleeping. Both men had been shunned, though, with whispers that they had been in on the treachery. Once news spread of the blaze, Morna White Mask returned to Castle Black from Queensgate, as had Longspear Rick from Oakenshield. The best fighting men went off with Longspear Rick south in search of Mance Rayder, which left Morna White Mask as the unlikely leader of nearly 2,000 wildlings. Mel then considers Mance Rayder. The letter was from him, she concludes, not Ramsay Bolton. Bastard. That's how the letter began. It was designed to anger the boy Jon Snow. And who else calls the men of the Night's Watch Black Crows except for the free folk? Mance must have wanted chaos at the Wall to give himself an army once more. And if Longspear Rick finds him, he will have succeeded. But how did he know that Tormund would be here with the wildlings? Val, she concludes. Mel comes to the base of Hardin's tower. She looks up to the window near its top. Val had been under guard, but Mance must have climbed up to see her. He must have ordered her to bring Tormund south as part of his scheme. Val was gone now. In the chaos of the mutiny, she had disappeared. No doubt she had joined with Longspear Rick in search of Mance Rayder. Mel then remembers the chaos of the mutiny. She had watched from her window in the king's tower. The giant, the assassination, the fire at the shield hall. It had brought panic to all, except for the mutineers. They had been mostly Marsh and Yarwick's men, stewards and builders. They had the high ground with the archers on the stairwell, and they'd trapped their foes in the barracks and the mess hall, while the wildlings fled and hid. After the giant was brought down, the queen's men realized they were surrounded. Mel assumed the mutineers had won, and she and the queen's men would lose their heads. But then there was the boar. The thing came roaring in from the night and mauled mutineers. They opened the gate and drove the thing north of the wall, but by then the battle had turned. The loyal brothers broke free of their prisons, and the queen's men slew the archers on the stairs. The boy sat and captured Bowen Marsh, and he yielded. The mutiny had failed. Part 4. Morna White Mask and the Wildlings. Mel moves beyond Hardin's tower into the southern yard. It's filled with cook fires and tents for the wildlings who haven't found shelter in the towers and keeps. The wildlings all look up as she crosses the yard, at least 1,000 eyes watching her. And here you can add a lot of atmosphere on wildling life at Castle Black. It's likely very similar to when Jon walks through the wildling camps in A Storm of Swords. At the end of the yard, Mel comes to the Grey Keep, where Morna White Mask resides. The wildling guards stand out front. One orders the other to search Mel for weapons. The man reaches out, but just before touching her, he recoils in fear. They let her enter. Mel is taken to see Morna, who of course wears a white werewood mask. A young boy is at her side. The mask reminds Mel of the masks of the Shadowbinders, and here you can add some lore on why Shadowbinders wear masks and why Mel does not. Anyway, Mel mentions that the Weeper is attacking castles down the wall, and the Night's Watch wishes to integrate the wildlings into their command. Morna asks why she should fear the Weeper, and suddenly Mel remembers her vision of a wooden face. Was Morna that face? The 1,000 eyes her followers outside? But who was the boy with the wolf's face? She looks at the boy beside Morna, but he resembles more a ferret than a wolf. Mel says, "I saw you in the flames. I saw your eyes." Morna studies Mel suspiciously and asks who would have command. Mel says Ulmer of the Kingswood. The old man? He scares no one. Then Morna will say, "Do you know why the free folk listened to the bastard of Winterfell? They feared him. He was cruel enough to kill his lover, mad enough to betray Mance Rayder, daring enough to let us all through the wall. And that wolf, Oh, they feared that wolf. He frightened people. And then the boy by Morna's side will wrinkle his nose and howl. The wolf did scare people, Mel thinks, but not her. She had learned that dogs calm to the scent of lavender, so she would wear an oil that smelled of it. She doesn't know where the direwolf went after the mutiny. During the chaos, it must have escaped north of the wall, as the boar did. Morna will continue. She'll say that fear moves the free folk, and it's why she wears the mask. But she knows even with the mask, she doesn't compare to the Weeper. She hears the whispers, and half her people want to leave her for him. She asks if she thinks Ulmer of the Kingswood scares people more than the Weeper. Mel will tell Morna that if she wants to be frightened, she'll find someone to frighten her. Part 5. Cregan Karstark. Mel leaves Morna and then decides she needs to see Cregan Karstark, and so she heads to the undercellar of the Lord Commander's tower. Cregan and 2 of his men had been in the ice cells, but they had been moved by Jon Snow before his death. Now it was Jon Snow who lay in an ice cell, along with 100 other corpses awaiting burning. With the Night's Watch short on stewards, they had not yet prioritized felling trees for a bonfire. Mel finds Cregan howling and tells him to stop his mummery, and so he stops. She tells him that soon Alice Karstark and 200 Thenns will arrive at Karhold. Perhaps the castle will open their gates, perhaps not. Perhaps there will be a battle and hundreds will die, including your kin. You can stop the slaughter with a raven. Cregan asks why he would do that. Mel explains that the Weeper is coming. His men, the Thenns, and Karhold's garrison are needed here to defend the wall. Battle is coming, and they need every man to fight, including him. 1 raven to Karhold, telling them to stand down, and Cregan earns his freedom and a sword. And who knows, perhaps when the battle is done, the Magnar of Thenn will lay dead, and him alive. Cregan considers it, and then refuses. His garrison may win the battle, and besides, he just needs his father Arnulf to return home with their army. Mel points out that he may not live that long, and Cregan scoffs. He said he's not afraid of dying, and he has no fear of this cold cell. Mel says that he has no danger of dying from the cold. He has danger of dying by fire. That silences Cregan, and Mel says they'll speak again in the afternoon. And finally, Mel heads to see Brandon Norrie. The Flints and the Norries had been given space in the Silent Tower. Mel is escorted in by 2 burly men dressed in fur. In the corner of the room, she sees the wet nurse with Mance's son. After the chaos of the mutiny, the wet nurses had taken possession of the babe and had gone to live with their fellow clanmen. Mel notes that it would be difficult to get her hands on the baby again. Brandon Norrie meets with Mel and asks what she wants. She tells the story again. The Weeper is moving down the wall, taking castles. We need every fighting man, unified. Our knights, the Black Brothers, the Wildlings, and your Northmen. Brandon Norrie laughs and says the group is as unruly as 1,000 horny hares, each hopping in its own direction. Who could possibly lead them? And Mel responds, I will. And there it is. Good luck writing, and we'll see you next time.